All right, thank you everybody for coming out here tonight for ISSessions. I know we got exams coming up, but I guess take a little bit of a pause there with some sessions. So today, pretty excited, we got our usual news roundup. Following that, we got Guillaume doing a walkthrough on web app testing and Burp Suite, getting some practical stuff there. And then after the break, we'll be joined by Leon, who's going to be talking about radio hacking. So very excited because I don't know anything about radio hacking. So I look forward to that one. But we'll get started with the news. So Lucas, you can take it away.
All right, first story, ransomware attack on Fidelity National Financial. Basically on November 21st, they announced that they've been the victim of a cyber attack. Pretty much what they are is they're like an insurance service. They do real estate. They also deal with mortgages and escrows. Basically, they had a complete wide outage after the event and it left people unable to access their money that's in there. So for example, a story, one woman sold her house for over $300,000 and she can't contact them about anything, so all the money's just held up. Most people can't pay their mortgages, and the ransomware gang, Black Cat, has claimed responsibility for it, and the issue's still not resolved. It's been, I believe, like 2 or 3 weeks, and nobody can get any statement out of FNF. That's really it. Everything's just still held up. The next one, title's wrong, but basically, some guys just extracted some training information from ChatGPT. So on November 28th, Google's DeepMind team, they released like a post essentially detailing how they did it. And all it really was is they used a prompt that just repeated the word poem forever. And then eventually at the end, it would break from the standard dialogue and it would fall on all its pre-training data, so all the memorized data that it had, and it would just start dumping mass amounts of information. The report found that ChatGPT dumps 150 times memorized data the rate of any other models. And then this is basically just due because of the amount that it memorizes is a lot more than pretty much everybody else. And it exposes the necessity for testing all parts of a modern system. The researchers did provide some solutions to the problem, but they pretty much came to the conclusion that you can't fix this off a surface level issue. It's more deep. So even if they did fix it, like which they did, similar exploits still exist, so there's certain ways you can get around the block into it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I know we did a talk on like LLM vulnerabilities in September. Maybe they could have watched that. But for this story, so it's kind of old news with some new updates. I don't think we've actually covered it at any sessions yet. So if you haven't heard, Okta had an intrusion on October 19th. And what happened was they disclosed this breach in their customer support system. And when Okta's working with their clients, it's pretty common for them to request that the client upload an HTTP archive file or a HAR file. And these HAR files often have sensitive data, which threat actors could use to hijack sessions and sort of spoof regular accounts in those customer environments. And well, this is what happened. Okta was made aware of this by one of their customers in October, who, after putting in the HAR file, just 30 minutes later, they started seeing this malicious spoofing. So we got some more updates. The first one was November 3rd. Okta put out their report saying that the root cause was an employee who logged into their personal Google account on their laptop. And we also learned the threat actor had access from September 28th to October 17th. And the good news is they only accessed files associated with 1% of their customers. At least that was the case until we got the update on the 29th when Okta said they actually downloaded a file which contained information on all the users in their customer support system. So the report they downloaded, it had 15 different fields. However, only very few actually had them all filled out. 99.6% only had the full name and the email address filled out. And none of the fields were like password or anything. So the main concern which Okta highlights is the risk of threat actors using that information to leverage more sophisticated phishing attacks.
So, I guess we can start. Hey everyone, so this just is like an small introduction on like web application testing. We only have like around 30 minutes for the talk, so I won't go into details on every single attacks on like web application because it's gonna take like forever to do it. So we're just doing like a basic and some like talks on why we should do like pen test on web, and then how to do it, and how to utilize like a tool that is basically like the most powerful one and most common use for like web testing, which is like Burp Suite. This slide is for people that don't have like a lot of knowledge on web application in general, so I just want to introduce it. So this is the agenda for today. Just introduction on like introduce myself, introduction on like web application, then why do we do it, why, how, and what is like web application penetration testing for like web app. Who am I? My name is Zhang. So I'm working for BMO, doing co-op for like 8 months as a security testing analyst, and then moved to after graduated. They couldn't find a position for me, so I have to like work for Bell for like around 6 months, and then I moved back to BMO as their consultant. So the title is kind of fancy, but I'm basically a penetration tester, but specifically for web. Like I only do web, nothing else, no system, no mobile, no cloud or anything, just web. And yeah, that's pretty much about me. So I get this definition from like Wikipedia, which is web application is application software that is accessed using a browser. That's like the most basic definition of it, because you can still access the web application using like command line tool or like some other method, not have to go through a browser. But yeah, to access a web, we usually will use like an IP address, v4 or v6, depending on how mad you are, and also like URL, which sometimes some people will say like URI. Some companies are using like UI, which is one of them is like Microsoft. So URL, which we usually prefer like domain name kind of thing. So what is a URL? I don't know if like everyone knows about it already, but I will go deep into it. So this is like a URL, which looks a little bit different than the normal one. We don't usually have the username and password and the @ part, but that is like the hidden part of a URL that I want to talk about it. So the first part, which is HTTP and before the colon // which is a schema, and we can basically we can using like HTTP or HTTPS on like web application, but we can change it to like FTP, SSH, SMB, you name it. And then after that, the interesting part, which is the username colon password assign. That part is like really old. No one is using it anymore. Back in the day, people can use it for authentication, basic authentication, on like the web form and other stuff. Nowadays, no one's actually using it, and the browser will, like most browsers, usually ignore that part, and then we'll just omit that to access the web page. So then another interesting attack can come up with this is like you can trying to put in something like google.com @malicioussite.com, and then the browser will ignore the google.com ad, and then they will just visit the malicious site without knowing that they are visiting a different website. So we go to that example later on. So this is like the authentication part, and then after that will be the domain name. This part, the correct name with it will be like host, because if we add like another dot, like www.example.com, then it's gonna be a host, because www is a subdomain instead of like just a domain name. Yeah, and after that will be the colon port, which is usually will be like 80 or like 443 for web application, but sometimes a company wants to run two web servers on a single machine. So they're gonna have. After that will be the path. The whole slash, starting from the first slash, will be the path, and going all the way to the last slash, that one. And if you include the endpoint, then we call it an endpoint. Why do I have to let you know this is an endpoint? Because later on, if you look into web application, you will know that right now we are using a lot of API, and API utilize a lot of endpoints for a single web. So that's why in web application, we use the word endpoint a lot. It's just basically the end of the path, the end point of the path. Yeah. So we go into the example that I talk about. It's just like duo.com at maliciousite.com. Another interesting attack is that sometimes you go to a web application, you find a vulnerability, you can inject something on, for example, you can get a redirect to a different website, and then you find an injection point on that URL, on the redirect URL, on around for example, around this. Then you can just inject at sign malicious-sign.com, and then it will just ignore the whole part before it. And that is for introduction. So why web application testing? If you talk about why you should go into it, I have no idea, because we have way more field that is more exciting than web application. System is basically you can get root on get the over control the whole system, and then get a reverse shell, the whole feeling when you get a shell. Web app is a little bit different. You won't be able to get a shell 95% of the time, but you can find different things. How many people knows about SQL injection? This one? Okay, plenty. So SQL injection is basically you inject something onto a web application, and then you interact with the database in the backend directly, and then you can extract information from database using web application. And SQL injection is, how many people can imagine that by using just a single code, you can just get an error based from the web application, and then you can just extract all the information from 2 different databases on a really big company website that billions of dollars. And who can imagine that you can actually get a key on a single request that can control the flow of the money from that company? Well, speaking from real world experience. So why web app pen test is so popular right now? Because every single company, almost all the companies, they will have one web application when they released, or at least. And the demand for that is increasing, and not many people actually go into it. So a story that I worked at Bell before, and not many people will, a lot of people I talk to, they don't want to stay at web, they want to move to system later on. So, and a lot of people the companies are demanding for it. And I guess that's the main reason for everything. For the second thing is the how. So, well, this talk is more about the how. We will use a tool, how we can test it, how we can use it to utilize some attacks. I won't go into details on the attack. I mostly just want to show you how we usually do web application testing. For what? It's why? So what is web application penetration testing? Basically, it's a pen testing. The client will give you a web application. Most of the time will be in a testing environment, and you can do whatever you want to that environment without impacting the production. If you find something serious, really high impact finding, for example, SQL injection, then you can, they will have a follow-up, depending on the company, to have a test on the production environment. That is on the pen testing side. Yeah, that's pretty much like a little bit introduction on that one, because we don't have a lot of time, so I cannot go into detail so much. So for this one, I told you that this one will have like we will talk about like the Burp suite, which is basically it's a tool that allow you to intercept traffic and then changing request in basically like in real time, so that you can change the request, sending different inputs, and then using it to just spin up the thing to intercept the input and then change it in real time, and having it, you can like messing with the application. Sorry, my VM was having some problem or something. It was working the other. I was gonna use the like community version because like most people will have access to the community version. It's coming like the community is usually like free for everyone, and it comes with Kali. But because of the problem, then I have to use the professional version, which is like provided to you when you work at a company. So this is Burp. You have like a bunch of tabs, and there are like multiple things that you can do with it. It's a really powerful tool. So let me show you the. Oh, my bad. So I don't know if anyone have downloaded or like want to walk along with it. But yeah, basically you just spin up the machine, setting up it, click on create and reset, then it will just getting everything ready if you use Docker, and then just do it again. Yeah, and then you can see like there will be a bunch of different tabs that you can go to. This one will be like SQL injection and cross-site scripting, file upload, and you can try different things. For the setup, usually you have like security setup for the DVWA. It will have like multiple levels of setup. The low one will be like really vulnerable, and you can just try your like practice your techniques using it to see if it works or not. Then you can move up the ladder for like medium or high, depending on how you want to test your skill set. For example, if I go to like low setting, submit it, go to SQL injection. And for Burp suite, because Burp suite is an interceptor, so we want to instruct our browser to direct the traffic to Burp suite before sending it to the web server. So that's why I want to use like an add-on, so that we can like have more flexible instead of going to the browser setting and then setting it every single time. We can turn it on and off using like an add-on. Usually people will use like Foxy proxy on Firefox. This one because I use Brave for some reason. And so you have to use a different add-on, but you should use like Foxy proxy. So the proxy for Burp will be localhost 8080. Oh yeah, like sometimes you can use like 127.1 for the localhost. It will understand it, but some won't. So yeah, be careful on that. So if I instruct it and then I just send like a single code, for example, you can say like it returns an error for like SQL, for the SQL database. If you go to Burp, then you can see the traffic is getting captured. You can see it. Okay. Yep. So if we do single quote again, Yeah, so you can see like Burp capture the request as ID, and then you can see like there is a single quote in the URL, and then you can see the arrow. It gives you a cleaner interface to work with. Of course, it looks more technical. It's not fancy like a browser, but you can see all the input, and then you have control over the thing that you sent and then the thing that you received. For this one, as you can see that we have HTTP history tab on like proxy. When you proxy it through the whole thing, Burp will keep track of every single request sending, and it will log it under the HTTP history under the proxy tab. This one will be really useful for a lot of people because you don't want to intercept the traffic every single time. You want to use the HTTP history more. And my recommendation would be make this one in the opposite order, so that the newest request will be on top, and the lower, the oldest one will be at the bottom. And when you want to test something, you want to know that what request a browser is sending to the web server, and you don't want to mix it with a different request. Click on the number, and then choose a highlight, then go to Brave, something like that. Oh, sorry. Before you send the request, by the way. And just sending something like WMI. And then you can see that the request that the browser sent is like above the highlighted one. And then you can just unhighlight it. Another thing that really useful is repeater. When you go doing like web application testing, repeater will be your friend, your partner for everything, because repeater is just not a name. It repeat sending like it will repeat the process of sending requests to the web application, and it makes it easier. Like basically, you don't have to go into the browser and then sending it every single time. You can just try to send it, and then you change some input in here. For example, double quote instead, and then you can see the request change over time. Working with repeater, you would usually work with repeater a lot when you do web pen test. So I would recommend doing like some hotkey with it. For example, if you want to change the something on the ID, and then you have to use your mouse to move to the send button and then click on it, there is some hotkey that you can use. So you'll go to like the settings, go to the hotkey, just type it in, and then just type in repeater, so that you have like everything that you can set up for repeater. And then send to repeater is like Control-C-R, which is default. Issue repeater request, which is the send button. I doing like Control-Tab, and go back to repeater history so that you can comparing between different requests. I will show it later on. Switch to repeater is like Control-Shift-R, which is normal, which is by default. So why should we set the going back and forth on the repeater history? So when you are doing like the request, for example, single quote, so I already set the tab, so Control-Tab. It will help you to move a little bit faster. So if I want to compare this request to the previous request, I don't want to go back and forth like this. I just go like this, and then and then you can see the difference between them, because in web application, a bad request and a good request can just slightly different. Something like a cookie, a single underscore that is like out of place, and then it's gonna be like a big indicator already. So it's just like you can go back and forth seeing like the difference in real time, that kind of thing, and faster, by the way. And in repeater, you use it, like I said, we use it a lot. So sometimes we send a lot of tabs to repeater. It's kind of hard to organize, and you can just double click on the one, and then you rename it. For example, like SQL injection, so that you can keep track of what you are doing, and then also you can add it to a group. For example, group 1 testing, and then you put it in the testing. You can also change the color of it. I believe this, for example, like this, and then you can see that it will be easier to keep track of everything. Another thing is that before that, you can see like the web browser we usually URL encode the URL. Well, to that, when it transfer it to the server, it won't have any problem on transit. So in some attacks, it won't work unless it is URL encoded. So the best way to do it is you want to highlight it, and then you can see on this tab, there's Burp is already doing it for you, and you can change it under here. For example, like single quote, double quote, who am I, for example, and then apply changes, and then you can see it apply the change here to you. Yeah. Oh yeah, remember it. Remember to select it correctly. Yeah, like that. Or you can use some extension. I will talk about it if we have some time later on as well. Intruder is basically if you want to send a request multiple times, or like having a list that you want to just replacing the value and then just sending, and then to see like you want to brute force a single request, then you can use intruder. I won't go into detail too much. Another thing that we can use for like Burp Suite to keep track of everything easier, they just introduced this tab this year, early this year, which is organizer. This tab is using less memory because before this tab was introduced, everyone kept track of their finding by using repeater, just putting everything into repeater, which consumes a lot of memories. So they introduced organizer, which basically you have like a confirm finding. You can just send it to organizer, and then it will capture the request. It should send the thing, and then send to like organizer. Yeah, like this. Not sending the other way. Oh wait, having some. I think it has some problem displaying it. And basically, you can just comment having a note on the side. And then you won't be able to change anything on the request, but you have the proof that you are doing it, and you don't have to keep track of it on the repeater. It will save some memories for the thing, for your computer, because in an engagement, you can have like hundred thousands of requests coming in, and every single time when you do like a filter on the history, it's gonna take like sometimes it takes me 15 minutes to just display requests, filter everything. So it's gonna consume a lot of memory and stuff. So that's about organizer, repeater, and intruder. Burp also have another tool called collaborator, which allow you to send, like for example, Burp will create a URL, a unique URL for you, and then you can send it to a request. For example, if I do get started, copy to clipboard, and I want to, for example, I want to test if I put a URL into this parameter, will the server try to reach out to this URL or not? Then Burp will allow you to create a unique URL like this. No way to zoom in. So you can just put the URL in here and then send it. If the server tries to reach out to Burp, then it will display the request here for you to see like, okay, then the server is trying to reach out to the application. And you can, from there you will go to different, you can do like different attacks on it, depending on what attacks you want to try, want to test. Also for the scope, sometimes when you do web application testing, just like any penetration testing, you will have a scopes from your client, and you will have like, for example, example.com, and you won't be able to attack example1.example.com, but you can attack every single thing, other things. Then you can basically go to the setting tab and just typing in scope and go into project scope, and then you can add into it DVWA for example, and then it will ask you if you want to like avoid sending traffic to out of scope. I would say no, because you don't want to miss any single request. And then there will be a tab for exclude the scope. For example, like example .dvwa, for example. And then you can go through it, and you can use the filter to show only the in-scope item. And yeah, you can see like it will filter everything out and then only show you the relevant one. That's how you can use like HTTP history effectively, and how to use it for your like to your advantage. And I will talk a little bit on like extensions. I don't know if the community's version will have the extension or not. I use professional for so long, I forgot it. No? Oh, okay. Then I guess, I would say this one for like the professionals, I guess, for the alumni. For the extensions, there's multiple extensions that I recommend to install. So for example, like ActiveScan++, which is the one that it will add to the libraries of the scan, of the ActiveScan for Burp Suite, to have more covered on the attack surface and other stuff. Retry.js, which is a library, an extension for the outdated library, because the Burp library is not that good, I would say. And request smuggler is for request smuggling. It will help you a lot, but that attack is still quite new, but quite common to encounter. I will talk about it, I guess, later on if I have like a workshop for it. But this one is kind of like an advanced attack. So yeah, Hack Vector is like one of the best extension out there that you can that you should like add into your toolkit. Basically, what Hack Vector is doing is that instead of asking you to encode, like have to highlight everything and then have to change it, apply changes and other stuff, you can just using Hack Vector, and then you can see it offers a lot of different things like math, cross-site scripting, and then encrypt, decrypt. And by doing it, for example, like encode, and when you do, for example, there will be a URL encoded somewhere. Yeah, so URL encode. So you just need to copy this one and then put it between this, and then just everything that you go between them will be encoded before sending. So everything, basically, this one will be the middleman for for between Burp Suite and then the web application, and then with it, everything before sending it, it will encode everything inside between them, between that the starting point and then the ending point, and then it will send the request. It will save you a lot of time to basically like moving around and having to move your mouse back and forth. So you should check that one out. For the JSON Web Tokens, if you want to work for JSON Web Token a lot, you can use it, enable it, and then you can see like you can just paste the JWT and then it will decode the whole thing, so that you don't have to switch to the web page to decode your JWT. another one which is the content type converter. You can use it to convert between like the normal post request to JSON, for example, and then you can convert it back. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I forgot one thing. For the hotkey, you should have this one installed as well. You should have this one set up as well, which is the method change request method, which will save you a lot of time. Like for example, this is a get request. When you change it to like post, you have to add in like content length and then content type. You can just like Control M, and then it will move everything from the URL down to the post body, so that it will be easier for you. And then if you want to change it back, Control M again. It's just going back and forth and try to test it. I guess the time is up, so thank you for listening, and yeah.
All right, thank you. So we'll be taking another, oh, I think we got a question.
I just had a question. Yeah, so when you brought up Burp Collaborator, were you using this tool at work or for clients or even for bug bounties? Do you ever host your own collaborator server using Interact SH or anything so your client information doesn't get stored on Burp? Or how do you approach Burp Collaborator usage for SSRF or whatever you want to use it for?
Yeah, so for Burp Collaborator, right now I'm working for BMO, which is like I mainly do internal testing. We have like a whole separate Burp Collaborator for the internal one. So if it is like some information that we don't like really confidential, we will use Burp Collaborator. And if it is for like internal network, then yeah, we will utilize that one. I worked for Bell the other day, before that, and we do like external testing. And we have a different set of Burp Collaborator for our vendor. So yeah, it depends on the company. But usually the company will have one for the vendor, depending on their need of like how they want to protect their data, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your experience doing web app pen tests, do you find more vulnerabilities with like technical things like SQL injection, for example, or more business logic issues?
It's usually the mix between those two. I would say like the business logic is we found like a lot of it, especially like weak password policies, something like that. The technical aspect of it, usually, if you file, we usually do like technical for like, for example, if we have an engagement for like 3 weeks, we usually put around like 2 weeks into technical aspect and then 1 week for like the business logic, because the business logic is more easier. Like usually it will be mixed with the technical aspect. If you find something that is like you can bypass authentication, for example, using a request, like you can just go to a different request and then bypass the whole thing. It's a mix between business logic and then the technical aspect. So if you just test the technical aspect, it will have a little bit related to like the business logic. The business logic, like the peer one, it will usually go to like policies and how the companies handle the data and how they doing something in the back end, and they have to apply certain rules for that. So yeah, there will be a mix between the findings.
Okay, I think we're ready to start. So I'll start with a video, and thanks for coming, everyone that's here physically at the ISSessions, and thank you for coming for all the folks on over the Discord or on YouTube. So let's start with a video. So what you just heard is Toronto Fire. And yes, we can listen to them. We can listen to a whole lot more stuff. This is their dispatch, and you can hear pretty much everything that's going on in the city. And the thing is, radio is a lot more interesting and a lot more widely used and a lot more insecure than you might think. So welcome to this presentation. Oh, we don't need to play it again, please. My name is Liang, also known as KTEX. Today I'll be giving you, well, an introduction, but very technical introduction into radio security. So, first, before we start talking about the security risks themselves, let's talk about why radio security still matters at all. And then we're gonna go through each of the risks, and we're gonna be also be talking about how to apply radio security. How do you actually use them, their vulnerabilities in pen tests, for example. And as a bonus, if we have time, we will also talk about radio security in electronic warfare. It's not going to be very comprehensive, but we're going to cover how to secure your radios in like combat scenarios. At the end, we'll have a Q&A, so if you have any questions, we can leave them to the end. And if you're interested in any of the stuff, you don't need to take notes. The slide will be available to you at the end. So the scope of this presentation mainly focused on LMR, so land mobile radios. It's basically these push-to-talk radios. The stuff we're going to be covering in the presentation today could also apply to other radios, like high-frequency radios and stuff. But when we talk about radios, it's mainly today we're mainly talking about these. Okay. So these radios are used by public safety, as you can imagine, EMS, fire, government agencies like some of the buses like Durham Region Transit and Metrolinx, right? Those agencies also use these radios. Commercials, businesses, like for example Sheridan, we're going to cover it, and individuals. So you can easily get these radios yourself, license-free. Individuals can also use it, and also amateurs as well. So before we start talking about the radios themselves, we need to clear some misconceptions. First, a lot of people say, okay, radios are obsolete. Why don't you just use your phone, right? Don't make a phone call. It's secure and it's advanced, right? You get all technologies. Well, there are a lot of reasons, but basically, the radios have irreplaceable advantages, including availability. For example, if your cellular network goes down in an earthquake, your radios may still work. They have independent infrastructure. So, the radio sites are connected using T1 phone lines, microwaves. Your phone servers could go down, they could still work. And in the worst case, if all the infrastructure goes down, two radios like this can still talk to each other, directly. You don't need infrastructure for some of these radios to work. They're super durable, all the military standards, dust-proof, waterproof. They are simple to use, pick it up, press TDT, and you're good to talk. Accessibility, again, it's instantaneous, push and you talk, and there's no dialing anything like that. And they're also super secure. So this one, for example, has a security module that is FIPS 140-3 level 3 compatible, super secure. Trusted hardware, trusted execution environments in this, hardware encryption. And they could be smart too. So these radios and some of the other radios can actually fall back over LTE network or Wi-Fi network, so broadband in general. And they can also be integrated with CAD systems. They can also be integrated with, so CAD will be computer-aided dispatch, used by police and those stuff. And they can also be integrated with Android Team Awareness Kit, those kind of advanced software used in combat scenarios. So they have irreplaceable features. Imagine your officer having to get a phone like in the middle of a shootout and have to start dialing their dispatch. Doesn't work. So misconception 2, nobody uses radios anymore. And that is just not true. So if we can take a look at this whole list, and these are all of the truncate systems used in Toronto. And these are just truncate systems. There are 60-something of them. And there are way more businesses not using truncate systems. A truncate system is one of the larger, more complicated radio systems. Think of it like a small cellular system used for radios. And there are a lot more simplex. So for example, I can just take these two if I'm a small business, and I'll be able to talk, right? So there are still a lot of people. We can take a look who's using them. We can see University of Toronto here. We can see Toronto Hydro, Toronto Zoo, bunch of hospitals. We can see Humber College over here. And these are just, there are a lot of businesses and agencies that could be using radios that you don't know. And of course, Sheridan College also uses, and we're going to come back to this and talk about Sheridan system as well in a bit. So in general, radio security matters because first, they are still widely used. There are still people that are using radios. So if there are nobody using them, then why do you care, right? But the thing is, they are still used everywhere. And radio security is largely overlooked. When you do a security audit, if you ever did it, you deploy your SIM, you deploy your EDR, you have a security retainer with some MSSP, but do you ever think about your radio security, right? I don't think people actually think about their radios at all. Like, okay, we have our server secured, we have all this software installed, we have logging, but how about the radio security of our security guards? I don't think anybody think about it nowadays. And yet, great damage could be done with abusing these radios. So this is why radio security still matters today, and this is why, hence this whole talk. So before we talk about the risks themselves, I need to give you a little bit of a primer on radio themselves. And don't worry, you don't need to remember any of this. So just to give you an idea, radios, there are mainly two types. Analog radios, like these older, cheaper ones, and they have different modulation like FM, AM, SSB. You don't need to know what they are. And another type of radio will be digital radios, like this one I'm holding on my hand. This is a P25 radio. It's mainly used by public safety and government agencies around North America. And there is also DMR radios. It's a European standard. P25 is a North American standard. DMR is a European standard. It's mainly used here by businesses and sometimes small businesses, individuals, amateurs, hobbyists. They mainly use this. So analog radios, of course, they transmit the audio over analog. Digital, they convert it into digital data and then transmit data packets, data frames. And of course, there are many, many other modes that we are not covering here today. But these are the primary ones that are, being used around North America. And I want to talk a little bit about how, the operation modes of these radios. You can have simplex, which is basically just one radio talking to another. You have a repeated, which is the same. You have different channels, different actual frequencies allocated for different channels. The difference being that you set up a repeater on somewhere, high up, which gets better coverage, and that has a lot of power. So this and this, you can probably talk for 1-2 kilometers in a city. But if you have a repeater, you can cover easily up to like half the city, like 10-20 kilometers, right? And finally, so these two are called conventional modes. So you have to allocate an actual frequency for every channel. So imagine, police will get to, fire will get to, EMS will get to. The issue with the conventional mode is that none of those channels, it's very unlikely that all of those channels are being used all the time. You could have police talking and the EMS talking at the same time, and the rest of the channels are just wasted. Yet, spectrum is a very valuable resource. So nowadays, we have more trunking systems, which you get a control channel and a whole bunch of voice channels. And they are being allocated dynamically. So if I press to talk on the radio, the control system will tell me, okay, you get voice channel 1, go talk there. So now we have this dynamically allocated system, which means the same amount of channels with more capacity, or the same amount of capacity with less channels. So it's much more efficient. And it's not worth mentioning that trunking systems can get a lot more complicated than traditional systems. They can sometimes carry data over them, and they support more advanced features as well. So now that we've cleared the basics, why it matters, and the basics of radio, we can talk about the insecurities in radio. So first, lack or weak encryption, scrambling. 2, lack of authentication. 3, unprotected metadata. And 4, poor user security awareness and programming. So poor user programming. Let me just take this off. It's getting hot in here. Okay. So we're going to be taking a look at each of these four. So let's start with the lack of or weak encryption scrambling. So a lot of these radio transmissions are made in the clear without encryption. So like what we just heard, Toronto Fire Dispatch. Some of them have security, but really bad, really bad. So like basic security by Motorola is only 10 bits of security. For any of you crypto nerds out there, you know it's really bad. And also we have RC4, which is also another encryption commonly used in radios. It's also branded Enhanced Privacy ADP by some companies. ADP stands for Advanced Digital Privacy, but it's not really that advanced. It's only 40 bits. So it can be broken in under a day. And I say it can be, it's not theoretical. We have tools that can actually break it in under a day. So this is what it looks like in the radio program software. You can see that you have enhanced here, you have enhanced encryption here. So these are basically your RC4 in reality. And before we talk about how to remediate it, we'll have to understand the technology a little bit. As I said, it's a rather technical talk. So there are two streams to it. There is digital and analog. They are separate. So for digital, you have digital encryption. So because we are sending digital data, essentially, we can use the common encryption modes we're using for other digital stuff we use, like AES, DES, all of the encryption theoretically in NSA Suite A and B we can use. Most of chances are the only one that you're going to get in these radios that's good enough will be AES. Other stuff like DES, RC4, obsolete, and a lot of other algorithms are not commonly supported on these radios anymore. For example, this one only supports, you can see the sheet below, it supports ADP, AES, DES, and DVP. So only AES is actually secure enough. And of course, there are the classified stuff used by governments. And for example, Fascinator, used by the US government, it's highly classified. All we know right now is its name. We don't know how many security bits it has. But there could be more, and their algorithms are not disclosed or anything. So the better, more advanced, more secure, top secret stuff, they have better stuff for it. For analog radios don't have encryption because you're not turning the signal into data, so you can't digitally encrypt it. So instead of having encryption, we have what's called scrambling. Just mess the voice up so you can't understand it. So usually speaking, we have voice inversion. So basic voice inversion. So imagine your talking voice on the spectrum. It will look like from frequency, your voice frequency from low to high. So we invert it. And then we send it. So if your radio can't invert it back, then you can't understand it. It sounds like gibberish. And the other ones are more advanced. So like rolling code. Imagine you choose a point in the frequency and you mirror your voice at that point. And then using a series of pseudo-random code, you can continue to invert it at different points of your voice. So it's even more messed up. And there is also split band, so you divide your voice into different bands, and then you invert them separately. And there is, usually speaking, voice scrambling is considered pretty weak. There are software that can help unscramble the voice right now. So. And also it has range problems, which we'll cover in a bit, so it's not used as much today. However, there are some scramblers like the Marconi Advanced Scrambler, which was used to be used by British police. It still hasn't been cracked yet. Here is a diagram of, this better shows how scrambling works. So you have your original signal here. You can split them into bands and invert them separately. And then you can also invert it separately, and then you shift them around. You can invert some of them, and then shift them around. So you get the idea, just mess it up. So you can't understand what's being talked about. And even if scrambling is secure, it has another problem. So we can see here, the blue line on top is the digital, and the gray line below it is analog without scrambling. And the other gray line below it, this is the scrambled signal for analog. So the axis below is signal strength, and you can see digital signal, whether encrypted or not, as the signal gets weaker, it still stays really strong until a certain point and start to fall drastically. Whereas analog tends to fade gradually as you move further as it gets weaker. But the issue with scrambling is that once you turn it on, the range drops drastically. So nowadays, people are just turning into digital, get encryption, so you get really good range and you're really secure with AES. So analog scrambling isn't really used anymore. And also because of this, most of the stuff out there that's analog aren't really being scrambled, otherwise it kills its range. Yeah. So before we get into the next slide, I want to talk about the mode notation a little bit. So in the following slides, if you see a big E, it means fully encrypted channel. Small e means the partially encrypted channel. So we can take a look at some of these systems and see how secure they are. So this is the Toronto system. So you can see the police are encrypted, but fire is not. EMS is not. OPP, their operations is not. But intelligence, they're supposed to be encrypted, but I've caught them forgetting to turn on encryption sometimes. All of the hospitals that you can see, North York General, hospitals for 6 children, all are encrypted. You can hear what's going on in those hospitals. And I have not really spent a lot of time listening to them, but chances are you can get some interesting stuff out of it. Except for this last one that I've never heard of that has really weak encryption turned on, and it's partially encrypted. So CN Tower, fully unencrypted. You can listen to what they're doing. Toronto Hydro, for some reason, is encrypted. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to slack off at work. University of Toronto, mostly unencrypted. And of course, Sheridan College, no encryption. So actually, we can listen to them on this radio. So now let's talk about, let's classify the threats we get with these stuff a little bit using the STRIDE model. So we could have different types of threats coming from the different vulnerabilities of radios, right? So we can have spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. So this is so we can better classify, standardly classify different threats and risks. So the issue with encryption is eavesdropping, which is information disclosure. Anyone can hear your traffic. You can have falsified intel. You could feed bad intel to those radios, which could be spoofing. And the thing is, it's really not that hard to listen in on these radios at all. You can get a $50 dongle from Amazon, and you'll be able to listen to all of the stuff that I listed above, right? You can listen to Toronto Fire, EMS, whatever, using just a dongle from Amazon with some software. If you don't want to worry about the software, there's also a whole bunch of scanners you can buy online. They cover, for example, this one I have on my hand right now. It covers from 25 megahertz all the way up to something like 1200 megahertz. And it also covers all of the modes that you're gonna, most of the modes at least, that you're gonna need to listen to all of the traffic. It's about 1 gram, so it's a commercial product, so it's gonna be on the expensive side. But if you don't want to set up software, if you just want to walk around and be able to listen to stuff, you can get something like this as well. And how do you listen to them? You can also use just actual radios, right? You can use actual radios to listen to radio traffic. But the downside of this, they're gonna be very expensive. For example, this costs about 1 grand. This costs about 10 grand, brand new, but you can get it used for like 5 grand or something. But still, they are significantly more expensive if you really want. But the upside is that they have a lot more features. And also you can transmit, but don't. By the way, the Canadian law, the TLDR of this is don't break encryption. You can listen to unencrypted traffic, but don't break encryption. You can go to jail for that, technically. So the remediation to weak encryption, of course, is to use strong encryption, right? Just encrypt your radio traffic with AES 256 or something better, and you'll be done. Really? It's actually not as easy as it sounds. So with encrypted radios, you need really expensive devices. So this one does AES encryption, it's like $1 grand. This one doesn't, it's $50 on Amazon. So these devices can get really expensive. And you need to worry about key distribution. Imagine you have like a fire department, you have 1,000 radios. How do you transport the encryption keys onto those radios? So in order to key a lot of these radios, you will need something like it's called a KVL KDF. It's called a key field device. You store the key on here and you use a cable to connect it to the radios to field them the keys. So when you have a lot of radios, how are you gonna fill the keys to the radios, right? And especially if you want to rotate keys frequently, it's a really big challenge. So you probably want something called OTAR, over-the-air keying. You will have a key management facility, which is like a server you run, and then you'll be able to rekey every radio over the air. You don't need to bring them in. But the thing is, this is incredibly expensive from what I heard. So are you really down to invest the money? Key loss procedures. So if you have a security operation, you have operators in the field, and some of these radios clear their encryption keys after, for example, after you remove the battery. So if one of your radios, the keys gets wiped in the middle of something, what do? The only way for the operations to continue is for everyone to turn off their encryption. Otherwise, the radio that lost its key wouldn't be able to hear anybody else. So now your encryption is compromised, right? So these are the things you need to consider before you implement, or when you're implementing encryption. And another caveat is that most of these radios don't support perfect forward secrecy, which means if a key gets leaked in the future, all of your previous conversations encrypted with it can be decrypted now. So it's all stuff you need to consider when you're doing encryption with radios. And also something else you're probably going to hear is called CTS-CSS, so continuous tone coded squelch. It has nothing to do with security at all, but they're sometimes branded as privacy code. You go to, say, Walmart, right? It says, oh, we have so many privacy code, but it absolutely has nothing to do with security. What it does is to basically inject a low frequency voice into the voice that you're sending in analog radios, so the receiver radio can detect if that's there. If it's not, it thinks it's voice. So it thinks it's noise. So it's used to eliminate noise. It has nothing to do with privacy or security. So when you see CTCSS or DCS, just keep that in mind. It's the only way you're going to secure stuff in radios, encryption. Second issue, lack of authentication. So a lot of these radio systems, like trunking systems, they have no authentication or really weak or vulnerable authentication. I'm going to give you a few examples. So the P25 used by law enforcement and stuff. Tetra used in Europe. They all have some problems. And DMR has restricted access to system, RAS. I'm going to cover a little bit about that because I didn't find a really good paper on it. So let's take P25 for example. How authentication for these radios work? Your site, when you connect to the site sends you a authentication challenge. It's a challenge and response, right? You get a challenge, you use your common shared encryption key to send a response, and then you're registered. But the issue with P25 link layer authentication is that, and I quote this paper, a successful authentication does not establish a session key, but instead merely changes the state of the association to the authenticated state. What that implies is that when you authenticate it, it says, okay, this radio ID is good, so now you can send traffic, but you don't actually negotiate a session key. What that means is that I can listen to who's talking, so that means that radio is authenticated. Then I can program my own radio to the same ID, and now I can talk on the system. So that's a really big problem. We can bypass that authentication. Tetra, I'm not an expert in, but this paper says that it also has some really big problems with their authentication protocol. I'm not too deep into Tetra, so I'm not going to talk too much. And DMR RAS, what I heard, I have not validated that. What I heard people say on the forum is that you can tailgate other signals. So after a legitimate radio transmits, you can key up right after it, and you'll be able to talk on the system. So problem with that, impersonation, obviously. If I can get my radio onto your system, I can put whatever ID on it, then I can pretend to be anyone on system. I can do spoofing. I can, just key up, and now your security wouldn't be able to talk because I'm talking all the time. That's denial of service. The remediation for that, move to a separate protocol, but are there protocols that are secure, really? And also, if you're police, if you're fire, chances are it's mandatory for you to use something like P25, so moving to another protocol isn't always an option. If you can't, better to have a bad authentication than none. It still significantly increases the amount of work people will have to do to break into your system. maybe wait for proper authentication if that ever comes. And actually, encryption could help with authentication issues. So if you're worried about people impersonating other people, now internally you can share an encryption key such that if I impersonate someone, I don't have your key, so you can't really hear the traffic that I send. It solves impersonation issues to some extent. Third issue, unprotected metadata. There is a lot of metadata in digital radios especially. There can also be in analog radios, like all these that you're seeing here. So for example, this is some metadata that I captured for, this is actually Ontario's next generation provincial-wide network. So I'm using SDR to capture some metadata here. And this is a really fancy diagram, but it's not really that complicated. So you can see the VC1, VC2 right above. Those are the voice fragments. They can be encrypted. But the issue is with the stuff down here. You can see the source ID, tag group ID, all these are unencrypted, and you cannot encrypt them at the time. So now even if I cannot see, even if I cannot hear what you're talking, like Toronto Police, I can't hear what they're talking. And this is an example from Montreal. You can see all of the stuff on the left here shows encrypted. But the thing is, I can see, you can look at the from column. I can see the IDs that are talking. I can see who they're talking to. And it's still useful. So when you see an ID that's 10001, chances are it's dispatch. When you see an ID that's like 40251, that's probably some random foe in the field, right? You can still make out useful information from that. You can still make out who's on shift, what are the activities going on. Oh, by the way, you can sometimes also get location data. It's possible. It's called LRRP. I won't go too deep into that, but it's possible to, some of the radios send location data as well, and it's possible to intercept them. So the problem of this, obviously, is information disclosure. You leak a whole bunch of metadata, and how do you fix that? Well, you encrypt the metadata, right? So, but the issue is, can you? So encryption, for example, for P25, there is a standard being worked on, but it's not there yet. So as of 2023, they say we're working on it. When they're going to finish, we don't know. So fourth issue, the last issue, poor user awareness or programming. So your radio users, like security guards in Sherman, for example, do they actually know that their transmission can be heard? Not really. Do they know how secure the transmission is? Like if they use encryption, they could be using basic or ADP RC4 encryption, which are actually weak. So any serious adversary may be able to decrypt the transmission, right? But for example, if you're like some high security agency, you must know how secure your transmission is as well. They don't know that their incoming transmission isn't secure. So if I enable encryption on this radio, the traffic that I sent could be encrypted. But the traffic I receive could be unencrypted, and the radio will still play it. And that's also a big issue, because even if I cannot hear what you are saying, I can still feed bad intel to you by sending you clear traffic, right? And sometimes they just forget to turn on encryption, right? But it actually happens. So this is, you can see OPP, organized crime. They forgot to turn on encryption every once in a while, and I'll be able to listen to them stalking someone for an entire afternoon. Pretty fun. So also ergonomics. So these radios, they have a little switch on top which turns on or off encryption, especially with the older ones that have a bigger switch, and it's possible to bump that switch. So I've heard stories of radio techs actually use hot glue to glue that switch so people don't make stupid mistakes and turn it off. In this case, ergonomics is also a part of security, right? So the problem with user awareness and poor programming is, insecure transmission. Like they don't know it's unsecure. They say everything out there, and they disclose sensitive information. Right? They are unable to identify impersonators. They don't know the incoming transmission is unsecure. So remediations, obviously, train your users, but you have better solutions than that. You can use strong encryption so nobody can hear you at all, so you don't need to worry about them accidentally leaking information. You can strap your encryption keys, ignore clear voice, and enable clear alert tones. I'll explain what I mean. So with these radios, what you can do is strap the encryption key to a specific channel. So on the channel that you're on, if an encryption key is strapped to that channel, then it doesn't matter where you turn the encryption switch. It's always encrypted. So my recommendations to anybody that will actually program radios out there, what you can do is have two separate channels if you have to have the same frequency encrypted and unencrypted. So when you do actually use the radio, you can set up voice announcement like tag 1 secure, tag 1 clear, right? So your operators will have less of a chance actually bump off the switch. You can program to ignore clear voice. So if there's someone without an encryption key trying to talk to you, you wouldn't be able to hear it. It would just be ignored. So you can't be fed bad intel. You can also enable what's called clear or low tones. So when I transmit on the radio like this, if my audio is not encrypted, so it has a beep, it has a little beep in front of it to tell me that, hey, your encryption is not on. And you can also turn it on for receiving. So when you're receiving audio, if it's clear, it will beep before it plays the audio. It's not that obvious, but it's better than nothing. So to recap what we talked about so far, I know it's really long, I know it's really deep and technical. So let's do a recap. So the problems we talk about with radio security is, lack of or weak encryption, lack of weak authentication, unprotected metadata, poor user security awareness or programming, and just to, just a general rule of thumb, how to secure your system, follow these. Use a strong encryption, enable link layer security if it's available to you, enable link layer encryption if it's available to you, use security-oriented radio programming. Programming is in such a way that it's easier to use, that is secure by default, that users can't easily make mistakes. And finally, conduct user training. So here comes the little more interesting part. So how do you actually apply radio security in pen tests? I think this is what you could be more interested in. So first, passively, we can do signal intelligence. We can figure out the shift patterns of security guards. When they come on shift, when they come off shift. In that gap time, it could be a good time to do that stuff, right? Where they patrol, their patrol areas, their current locations, you can hear, oh, I'm going to room, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the security guard is over there. He's not in my way. You can get their mode of operation, their habits, what they do, what they say. And you can also sometimes extract really sensitive information from the radios. So for example, supervisor names, their phone number. So now when you're going in, oh, I'm looking for your supervisor, James, right? You can also use them actively, although there are legal implications, but if we were to ignore those and talk about what could be done, you can feed them bad intelligence, cause a havoc. There is disturbance at door 2B, but you're at door A. Now you slip in because everybody is at door 2B, right? You can request access to physical locations and information. So you can, listen to the security guards, how they, for example, I listen to different colleges, University of Waterloo. Can you please, so dispatch will be telling them, can you please provide access to room 3421, right? And you can also request access to information. Hey, dispatch, what's the name of some guest that's coming this afternoon? That kind of stuff, right? And there's something interesting you can do is you can jam and pretend to be dispatch, for example. So if dispatch is here, you're like the security patrol is here. How do you pretend to be the dispatch? You get someone close to dispatch, jam their communication, and you get someone closer to the patrol and send your own transmission. Now dispatch can't hear what you said, but the security patrol can hear the bad things you said. It could not be jamming, because jamming is illegal in Canada, but you could key up and occupy the channel because your signal is simply stronger in there, right? As I said, there are legal implications here, and you need to read the law a little bit before you actually do anything. You can simply disable their communications. As I said, you can't do jamming, but if you simply key up and everybody can't talk, and you still disable the communications, so you disable backups, you disrupt their dispatch operations, right? And also you can use it as a disguise. So if, for example, I'm wearing this security jacket, I have a radio on me, everybody will think, oh, this guy's security, right? And I'll give you a real story on how to use it as a disguise. Like, you don't even need to know how it works. Just put it on you, and people think you're a security guard. So, last year we had a security program, and we had a security course, and one of the tasks was to do dumpster diving, get into the areas that you're not supposed to be, and see if you can get any interesting documents from the recycling bins, right? It was during COVID, so there weren't a lot of people in the office, but so what I did was I had a high-vis vest on me, I had a helmet, and I had earmuffs on my neck. I had a radio in my pocket, so I just walk into places, right? What I did was I had 2 channels on the radio. So I have channel 1 on Seneca dispatch, for example. And so when I'm walking around, people are gonna hear dispatch audio, right? And if I get into trouble, okay, now I secretly turn into channel 2, which is my friend. And then I'll have them play as dispatch and excuse my way out of the situation. So this is something you can do, and I tried it in real life. Although I didn't ever need channel 2 because people just let me into anywhere. They swipe their own cards to let me in, but this is something you could do, right? And you can be creative. And this is, nobody actually talked about how to use radios to break into places. This is one way. And you can be creative and think of more stuff. So those are the main points that I have today, but I want to give you a little bit of a bonus and talk about radio security in electronic warfare. It's not comprehensive, it's just for the fun. So in a war zone, you have a little bit more challenges. You want to avoid detection or direction finding. If you are some infiltrating force, you don't want people to know that you're there. You don't want them to find out where you are, even if they see the signal, but you don't want them to directly find you. We can break it down into different domains. So first, spatial domain. We can use a directional antenna, terrain masking, signal reflections, low power, and keep moving. So I'm gonna use a map to illustrate what that means. So the blue dots are friendly forces, and red dots are foe. So you're trying to get your communication from the top of Sheridan College all the way to the mall over here. Now if you're using omnidirectional antenna, so these antennas send in all directions, you're blasting out maximum power. What happens? Everyone hears you. So you can use the terrain features and you can use a directional antenna, so your signal can only reach your intended recipient. So now your foes, they might not even know that you're talking at all. So, and also if you're, it also makes the direction finding a little bit harder. You can use the reflections, the multipath effects in cities, and it will be a lot more harder to direction find you. And if you're keeping moving, it will be even harder for them to direction find you. And second, you can do it in the time domain. You can use data bursts. So basically make your transmissions really short, so they can't get an accurate reading on where you're sending from. You can do it from the frequency domain. Use multiple frequencies, like civilian frequencies that do not attract attention. Or you can use frequency hopping, which is basically rapidly switching between frequencies, hundreds, thousands of times per second. So it's hard for people to notice that there's transmission going on. And even if they notice, they have to track that. They'll have to follow your signal to be able to properly listen to what you're saying or direction find you. Obscurity could also help when you're, if you don't want to be heard or found. You can use unpopular modulations, encodings, frequencies, but these are less effective against professionals. So, for example, if I use digital radio, the folks on the street with analog radio from Walmart wouldn't be able to hear you. That's what it is. You can also use obscure languages or code words, and obviously don't sound like military. Don't talk specific keywords, and use code words to obscure your conversation. So it's harder for them to realize that you're doing something sketchy, or or to understand what you're saying. So another thing interesting in tactical radios is electronic countermeasures. For radios, this usually means jamming. So it's a type of electronic countermeasure. And the solution, well, it's electronic countermeasures. So in radios, it's usually frequency hopping. You have some really common modes like half quick, sync guards, quick look at start. So the first three are used commonly in the US military, the last one used by the Russians. And you can also increase your transmission power. So if your power is higher than the jammer, your conversation is still going to go through. But you will need a lot of power. And you can also use a directional antenna to focus the energy of your transmission in one direction. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. So here's a demo from the 1980s of frequency hopping radios.
You will see the jamming signal is of immense proportions. Peak of the wanted signal, the jammer is 40 dB.
So yeah, that's the jammer, that's the actual signal.
The Jaguar net, of course, working in a secure mode, is now under threat from jammer, and communications are lost. A normal fixed channel radio would now have only one option, and that would be to change frequency or channel. Using the pre-programmed facilities of Jaguar, we can move that frequency back. The net is re-established, but it's still under threat from the enemy channel. If I center that display, there's our working net, targeting another channel. We're now going to enter the frequency hopping mode. In a frequency hopping net, one radio is nominated hop master with a remainder hop slaves. The operator of the hop master, which would normally be seen in headquarters, merely taps his hop button twice until he gets the big H display in his window. All the other radios, the hop slaves, use a small H blinking hop control lights. You can observe the radio is entering the frequency hopping mode. Within a maximum of 6 seconds, the radio net is re-established.
So yeah, that's how, the early days of radio hopping. So this Jaguar system specifically hops 500 times per second. So in every second, it changes its frequency 500 times. So if you don't have the hop code, if you don't know how to track it, first, you're not going to be able to listen to the whole conversation. And second, you can see that the jammer doesn't track the signal, so it's harder to jam the signal. And in the modern days, there are what's called the fast jamming devices, but we're going to cover that in a bit. So that's from the 1980s. So now let's take a look at the modern system. So instead of hopping 800 times per second, they hop 20,000 times per second. They changed their frequencies 20,000 times per second. And this is the Russian system. So this is roughly where the modern technology is. Most of these radios, commercial or used by public safety, they don't really do hopping. Only the military ones usually do them. So we covered electronic countermeasures. We covered electronic countermeasures. Are we really safe with the countermeasures? Guess what comes next? Electronic countermeasures, of course, right? So even if you're using, ECCM like frequency hopping, you can still be targeted. So this is a Russian system. It can track, it can work with radios hopping at, 1,000 hops per second. So the older radios, they can, they'll be able to deal with them. And better yet, this is only the export version. You can find it on Russian defense export. You can actually buy one if you want. And chances are for the militaries, they probably have saved better ones for themselves. So this one only does 1,000, but you could have a system that do better than that. So that's a really long talk. The takeaway for this talk, well, first, radio security is still really relevant and important. And the primary issues with these radios, encryption, authentication, metadata, and user awareness and programming. So if there's only one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, is that when the next time you do a security audit, when you look at the security of your company, do remember that radio security is a thing, and it could be very catastrophic if it do fail. There aren't, of course, a lot of people studying these nowadays. I bet it's probably the first or second time that you heard Toronto Fire Dispatch, but in fact, it's always going on, and if we turn to the channel, there are always somebody talking, and it's very interesting, and you can get into it yourself. And so, for example, this is Toronto EMS that's talking right now, if they do decide to talk again. Oh. Yeah, of course it's quiet when I turn it on. So, and if you want to get into these fancy stuff yourself, there are some suggestions you can go into. You can easily get an SDR from the Amazon or something, costs 40, 50 bucks maybe. And you can listen to most of the transmissions out there. Of course, it requires a little bit of fiddling with software. If you don't want to mess with software, you can get scanners like this, costs about $1,000, that covers all the modes. And if you want to talk, you can get, for beginners, you can get some license-free GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service radios. These only do up to like 2 watts, I think. You can get them on Amazon, Walmart, and you can just start talking. You don't need a license. If you want to go even further, if you want to try more radios, more frequencies, have more freedom in what modes, like digital modes and that kind of stuff, you can get an amateur radio license and get an amateur radio or these professional radios. But once you get an amateur license, there are a whole lot of more stuff you can do. Not just these radios, there are people playing with high frequency radios that do a few kilowatts that can, you can talk to the whole world, literally. So, and I personally also do a lot more interesting work with radios. We've barely scratched the surface of radio stuff today. So for example, this is one of the systems that we're building. It's a P25 trunking system. It's uses the same protocol as fire, EMS, and police, but it's using fully open source hardware and open source software. And I actually contribute some code to the system. It's actually right here. So this box can act as a P25 phase 1 trunking site. So it's pretty cool. So if you're interested in more, you're welcome to come to me and we can work on maybe some of these crazy stuff together. And there are some recommended materials if you're interested in what I talk about today. This will be available in, there will be a link at the end of this presentation where you can download the slides. You can get the slides, so you don't need to take notes right now. So now I'll be taking questions, if any, and you can contact me here. Any questions from the audience here? Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. First off, I guess, what's the professional career landscape for something like this? Is it a lot of just pen testing and military, or what's I saw you were working on the custom radio stuff that you just showed, but as far as somebody that's looking to get into this, do they have to get really lucky to start working with stuff like this, or is this skill set just one piece of your toolbox as like a physical pen tester, or what kind of opportunities are out there for radio security?
Also, practically, it's the thing about this. The interesting thing about this is both the upside and downside is that nobody's really caring about these things nowadays. So if you go into a physical pen testing security firm, chances are they're not really into these things as well. So for me, right now, this is only a hobby. I can't really make too much money out of it. So yes, it could be a very interesting tool in your pen testing toolbox. When you're breaking into, when you're doing pen tests on some company, usually people do SIGINT, right? Signal intelligence. They do deal with their Wi-Fi network. But now you have an entire new attack surface that you can use. And chances are it's not well defended as Wi-Fi. So professionally, there are, of course, stuff like RCMP. They hire radio professionals to secure and provision their radios. But jobs related to these are much more scarce than generic pen testing, of course. There is much lower demand for these. First, people don't realize they need to secure it. It's like 20 years ago, if you apply for a job for cybersecurity, you're not going to find many. It's the same thing with these things nowadays. So, but there are ones out there really rare, and chances are it's going to be a hobby or another tool in your pen testing toolbox.
Gotcha. Another question I have is the diagrams you showed of all the different, protocols or encryption or lack of encryption for the Toronto Police, the EMS, all that stuff. Is that public information? Where did you get that kind of a breakdown of what technology they're using, that kind of stuff? Where is that
Yeah, so you can,
Just early slides.
at the bottom,
Oh,
there is a radio reference database. There are also forums where they talk about these systems. So all of the information, what frequency they're using, what talk groups are there, they're on the database. You can easily look them up. And some of these scanners, they come pre-programmed with all the channels. For example, this one also has GPS. So what you can do is you can just walk around with this. You need to attach a GPS dongle to it, and it will, based on the information in the database, it knows what systems are around it, and it will automatically scan the systems around it. Right? And you can obviously also use those information to program some of your own radios to listen to them. Yeah.
Very cool. Sorry, just two more questions. I'm saving them, I'm gonna forget them. The third one is, you were talking about how one of the handheld radios you have could be used as a, I think you said a listener or a scanner, and then you said it can also transmit, but I think you said don't. What did you mean by that? You said one of the ones in front of you could also transmit, but don't use it to transmit or something. I meant to ask you earlier, but I want to interrupt your presentation. Why don't transmit with that one?
So it's laws and regulations. So all of these four, the ones that are behind me, they can transmit. But to transmit, first first option you use a license free. So essentially, a device is licensed. You don't need to be. So if you buy these from Walmart, you can just transmit whatever. Right? Second option, get amateur radio license. Essentially, if your device is not license free, you need to get a license. So either it's an amateur radio license or it's a business license. So for example, if you work for businesses that use radios, the business gives you the license training and license to be able to use the radio. So for example, if I'm on the Toronto emergency system, I don't work for them. I'm not authorized to transmit on the system.
I see what you mean.
Right.
Transmit on what you're listening to. Gotcha.
So there are two aspects here. First, you're not authorized to transmit on that frequency. Second, you are not authorized to use that system. So first, you're going to break Radio Communications Act by transmitting on a frequency that you're not supposed to. Like people talking on airband to aircrafts don't. Second, trunking systems can be considered computer systems. They have control channels. The radios are more like a small cellular system. So when you do that, you are actually tampering with the computer system. So that will be in the criminal code. So don't.
For sure. No, that makes sense. I didn't understand. I didn't know you meant don't transmit to where you're listening on. I misunderstood what you were saying earlier.
Right.
So, last question. You said that jamming is illegal. What if you have a contract with your client saying certain pen tests, whatever you do for a company is legal, or is jamming just completely illegal in Canada no matter what? Is that just like there's no way to get around it if you have a contract saying you're allowed to?
The military might be authorized to do that, if you're not in the military, even if you get a contract, you can't use a jammer. You just can't use jammers.
It's just not a thing. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Whether it's radios or cellular GPS, you just can't use jammers.
Gotcha. Cool.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one question. Some of these radios are not, you can't purchase them unless you're a business. So how did you get your hands on them?
All these, actually, you can purchase from Motorola, or I have actually some, I didn't bring my Kenwood radios, but you can get them from dealers. This, although it's used by the police, sometimes the military, you can still get them. It's really expensive, but you can still get them.
You don't need a business license?
You don't need a license. There are two caveats. First, you can get them used on eBay, for example. There are a whole bunch of these used ones out there. Some of them are parts built. Of course, they don't check your credentials for that. And second, you can also get them new from authorized dealers, whatever brand it is. And some of the more advanced radios, you probably want to convince them to sell it to you. But if you have a deep pocket and if you have legitimate use for it, you can definitely get them as civilians. It's not really that hard. So there are a lot of these radios just on eBay floating around, and if you look for what you want, you're gonna find it. The ones that it's hard to find are the military ones that do classified encryption, which are CCI controlled crypto items. Those cannot be exported out of the States, for example, and they cannot be. Some of those cannot be sold, and there's much less of those on public markets. Occasionally, you see, for example, U.S. military coming out from Afghanistan like on eBay, but they don't happen all the time.
Are you allowed to own a military radio?
If you can, if you manage to buy it, I suppose. But it's more of a supply issue than owning one. Like jammers, for example, you can't buy it, you can't export it, you can't own it, you can't use it, right? But radios, if you get them, you can have it, but it's probably not legal for you to transmit on it, but to have it, it's fine. Okay.
You don't need a license for any of these radios that you brought here with you today, but none of them require a ham radio license?
Pretty much all of them require a ham radio license if you want to transmit on them. If you're just listening, it's less of a problem. So it goes into the caveat of the law. So you're technically, if you don't have an amateur license, you're not supposed to be able to program a radio that can program the radio to be transmitted, right? But if you're only listening, if you are, have some measures in place to prevent them from transmitting. For example, on this radio that I'm listening to, the EMS, I'm not actually on their trunking system. This, for example, has a really interesting caveat. So for this radio to listen to P25 traffic, you will have to actually register on the system. You have to transmit and register on the system for you to be able to listen normally. So there is a trick called non-affiliated scanning that allows us to listen without sending any traffic. So if you use measures like that, you will be less of a problem. And of course, it's safer to get a scanner that doesn't transmit at all. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience here? Do you have any questions on Discord?
I think we're good.
Yeah, nothing
Yeah.
on Discord. You're good.
Okay. So thanks for coming to the presentation.